Chapter 4. Caden. What's up, Caden? You look as if you need a friend. I glanced over at Lane and huffed. I can use a friend, but I'd prefer a boyfriend or a friend with benefits. I'm not choosy, I said as if I'd lost my new puppy. Lane strolled over to me after he'd placed all the cute mugs for sale and books on the shelves for the students to read when they had their coffee or tea. This is a lot of shit to organize, but once it's done you'll have the best tea and coffee shop in Nevermore, maybe even the state. I sat on the sofa looking at the display, and it made me chuckle. It was nice and I was lucky to have my father and Lane, but I couldn't get over the feeling that I couldn't have the man I wanted. You couldn't guess what happened at Grayle's. I was just throwing that out, and I didn't mean for Lane to respond, but he never passed up the chance. I wish this whole saga could have come to a bitter end, where Austin had caught me and Gray in bed and he'd stormed out, never wanting to see either of us again. Then I could go on with my life with Grayle, and Austin could forget Grayle, walk away, and we could forget Austin ever existed, I considered. Well, that's wishful thinking. Austin is like Dracula. You'll have to place a stake in his heart and drag him into the sunshine, and even then you can't be sure about him. He'll find some way to return and fuck up someone's life. Lane loved his movies, just like Cole, and I'd bet that was why they'd found each other as friends. Everything that happened in life, Lane would make a reference to some movie he'd watched. I wondered what he'd say when I told him that Austin would be a father. I was lying in Grayle's arms, and then his phone rang. Lane cut me off. That's a bummer. That's against the rules. What rules? I thought. I haven't heard of any rules that say you're supposed to turn off your iPhone while in bed. Well, Scott and I have this rule where no one is to answer the phone while we're making love or getting ready to, or just lying around. I know you, my friend. I bet you were getting ready to soften your morning wood. Can we stop discussing me having sex with Grayle? I knew why I didn't want Lane to ask me any questions, because I didn't want him to lead me to telling him that I was fucking Grayle, and not the other way around. He'd known since I was a teen that I was a bottom, and he just took for granted that Grayle was a top. Who could mistake a gorgeous, powerful-looking man like him to be anything but? Besides, it wasn't any of Lane's business who fucked whom in the bed. And there was no way in hell I'd tell him, because he'd discuss my life with Scott, who probably couldn't wait to make small talk in the operating room. I didn't ask Lane about Scott wearing sheer underwear, although I suspected it when I'd used one of Lane's restrooms, and there were some hanging to dry. Neither one had sisters, bisexual with a girlfriend, or was into a threesomes. I thought I'd better not pry into their life, and I didn't welcome Lane into my sexual life. Well, what do you want to talk about? Brian will be here to help with the storeroom, and he's gotten pretty good mixing coffee and tea. He has ideas he wants to tell you about. I stood and paced around doing busy work. I stopped, turned to face the sofa where Lane was sitting, and glared at him. What? What's bothering you, Cade? Austin is having a baby. He jumped up and said, I knew it. I knew he was bisexual. Did you know? I had to admit it came as a shock to me, I confessed. Not to me. When did you find out? This morning. Oh yeah. When the phone rang. Well, who the fuck told you? I explained to Lane how I'd heard this woman ask for Austin, and said something about a baby she was having for Austin, and how Grayle explained to me she had revealed to him that she couldn't afford to care for a baby, and what the fuck did Grayle say? I don't know, but I can guess, and that's why I had to tell you. I need someone with a clear head to discuss this with. I'm too close to see this straight. There is nothing to see straight. Nothing is straight. It is as messed up as anything. Now you have a man who wants children. How do you know this? I found that out from his father, I said, pacing around. Cole told me. He wanted you to understand what you had to look forward to. He wanted you and Grayle to hook up, get together and fuck, just to get Austin away from Grayle. He knew that Grayle was one of those guys who gave his word, and he'd live up to it if it was the last thing he did. And now Austin has inadvertently saddled Grayle with his problems, and because Grayle is honest and a man of his word, he's fucked. And Austin is, no doubt, hoping to keep fucking Grayle, unless you intervene. The woman is having a baby for Austin, and I think Grayle is going to take the baby and he and Austin are going to get married, and Grayle will adopt the baby, I mumbled. How do you know that? I just know it. It's in Grayle's nature, just like it's in Austin's nature to be a hypocritical, duplicitous, and a disingenuous dick. Then, what are you going to do about it? Sit there and sulk? Lane questioned, then he rose and said, I need a strong cup of coffee. Want one? I said yes. I followed Lane around to brew some coffee. I don't know yet. When I glanced up, Brian had entered from the back. I'd given Lane an extra set of keys and meant for Brian to have some, because he'd single-handedly organized the place, helped with the choosing of the furniture, and all the other stuff I knew little about. He appeared to know what young men and women liked, even as he was close to 40. I guess being in all kinds of business ventures helped. How do you like the way I organized the place? Brian asked. I had been so consumed with my own problems and handed over everything to Brian and Lane, and I must say they took good care of me. This is great. Can I get a hug? Brian didn't wait for an answer. He took me into his arms and held me, and it was at that time I heard the door open and felt Grayle. Whenever he was around, my dick radar would go off, and my pants would tent. I jerked away from Brian's muscular arms and turned to face Grayle. I couldn't do any work today, because I had to talk to you. He glanced around, and I realized I hadn't introduced Brian. This is Lane's brother-in-law, Brian. Brian, this is Grayle, his friend. My heart sank. Was it too soon to say that I was his boyfriend? Couldn't he just say that? But what Brian said next floored me, and surprised me and saved my ass. Brian extended his hand and said, I'm glad you're just Cade's friend because I'm planning on asking him out for a date. I wanted Grayle to say something like, not on your life. I have just fucked him and it was the best ass I've ever had, and my first. He could have lied. I'd thought I was his and he was mine, but he stood there staring at me and didn't say a fucking thing. Grayle just grinned and said, I wish you all the luck in the world. He's a great guy. What kind of shit was that? A man told you that he was planning on dating the man you were sleeping with only hours before, where you just declared your undying love for him, and this was what you did? Before Brian turned and walked away, I pulled his arm and he turned with a curious stare, brought him back to me and gave him a kiss. With Brian being such a flirt, this might have worked in my favor. Either Grayle would get turned on and jealous, or I would lose him altogether. I was betting on myself that Grayle would see that someone wanted me, and he didn't want to lose me. Brian didn't know what was going on in my head when he offered me his tongue, and that was when I pulled away just in time. Okay. That's enough, I thought, and when he stared at me, he got the message and turned around, and that was when I got the bright idea to hit him on his hard ass. My palm hurt like hell after that stupid maneuver. I didn't know, Grayle attempted to say. Looking in his eyes, he was jealous, and I thought he'd read me wrong. He hadn't. I was in love with him, and as the young man he knew I was, I would try anything to get his attention, and I did. You didn't know what? That I would wait for you forever, until you decided who you wanted. You told me that I was too young for you, but maybe not for Brian. Maybe he'd like to feel me inside him. I knew I'd gone too far, but hey, that was my youthful impulse to hurt Grayle, because I'd seen on his face the minute he entered my shop that he was going to leave me. I didn't know how I came to that conclusion, but given what I knew about him, it was a given. Then we have nothing more to talk about, Grayle huffed and tried to walk away from me. I grabbed his arm and he turned. Don't you have something to tell me? I think you've said it all, Grayle said, before he took one last glance my way, placed his hands in his expensive blue slacks with a silk blend white V-neck sweater, with a cool black leather jacket covering his wide shoulders, and fuck me if he didn't look like a man I'd kill for with his handsome good looks, square jaw, and dimples. Those blue eyes were more than enough to make me wish every man dead who would try to fuck him. What the fuck was I thinking? I murmured as I watched him climb into his SUV.